In the history of modern warfare, tactical manuals tell you how to clear a room. They tell you how to call in an airstrike. They tell you how to treat a chest wound in the dark. But there is no manual for what Captain Ronan Vale saw on his 4th day inside Halvren City. There is no protocol for what to do. When the shooting stops, the smoke clears, and a 12-year-old boy walks into the middle of a crossfire. Not to surrender, not to run, but to salute the men who killed his family. Halvren City used to hold 80,000 people. Now, it held only ghosts and shrapnel. The war between the Northern Coalition and the Vaskari Front had stripped the city down to its skeleton. Every window was a sniper's nest. Every alley was a kill zone. The air didn't just smell like smoke. It tasted like pulverized concrete and burned copper. Captain Ronan Vale led Echo Squad through the southern district. 8 soldiers, 2 armored transports. Their boots crunched softly over shattered glass. Their objective was simple on paper: secure the hospital sector before nightfall. In reality, it was a suicide march. Movement. 3rd floor, whispered Sergeant Malik Torin. Ronan raised a closed fist. Behind him, the squad froze instantly. A torn curtain shifted in a blackened apartment window. Was it a sniper, a spotter, or just the wind dragging through? The ruins in Halvren. Guessing wrong meant you went home in a bag. They moved step by step, hugging the walls, sweating under 60 pounds of gear, until the first bullet hit. The shot didn't echo heroically. It tore through the air like something angry and alive. Private Jace Rell dropped before he even heard the sound. Blood pooled instantly beneath him, impossibly bright against the grey ash-choked pavement. Contact left. Torin roared. Gunfire erupted from 3 different rooftops. The Vaskari had funneled them into a kill box. Rounds chewed through the rusted hull of an abandoned bus as Echo Squad scrambled for cover. Ronan grabbed Jace by the tactical vest, dragging him behind a concrete barrier, his boots slipping in the debris. But it was too late. Jace was 19. He'd joined up because he thought the uniform would make him brave. Ronan stared at the kid's lifeless eyes for half a second. He swallowed the panic, buried the grief. He stood up into the storm, suppressed the 2nd and 4th floors. Put everything you have into those windows. The squad responded with brutal efficiency. Muscle memory took over. Heavy machine gun. Fire tore into the apartment block, ripping chunks of masonry into the street. And then everything stopped. Not slowly, not gradually. Stopped because someone had walked out of an alleyway, directly into the kill zone. He couldn't have been older than 12. He was painfully thin, covered in a layer of pale grey dust, wearing a jacket that hung off his shoulders. He walked past the burning wreckage, past the cratered pavement, directly into the open. Both sides hesitated. Fingers hovered over triggers. War has rules. Even in hell, there are lines you don't cross. Children are not targets. The boy stopped in the dead center of the street. He looked toward Ronan's position. Then he turned his back. He faced the Vaskari sniper nests. He stood tall. He snapped his heels together, and he raised his right hand, not waving, not surrendering. He saluted them with the terrifying precision of a hardened soldier. He held it for 3 agonizing seconds. Then he lowered his hand, turned, and bolted toward the Vaskari-controlled sector. Vanishing into the smoke, the gunfire resumed seconds later, harder, angrier, but the rhythm was broken. Ronan felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. That night, inside the shattered hospital lobby, Echo Squad tried to make sense of the ghost they'd seen. "It's psychological warfare," muttered Corporal Ilya Sorin, wrapping a bandage around a shrapnel cut. "They're sending kids out to mess with our heads." "No," Sergeant Malik replied, cleaning his rifle in the dark. "That wasn't random. Did you see his posture? The way he moved?" Ronan replayed it in his mind. The terrifying lack of fear. The absolute, mechanical purpose. "Find out who he is," Ronan ordered. "Tear this sector apart until we find a local who knows his face." Just before dawn, they kicked in the door of a flooded basement cellar. Hiding beneath a pile of moldy blankets was an old man, Tarek Ilian, a former history teacher and the last living civilian on the block. When Ronan described the boy, all the color drained from the old man's face. "His name is Elion," Tarek whispered, his voice dry as paper. "Elion Varek. Where is his family?" Ronan asked. The old man looked at the floor. "Gone. 3 weeks earlier, before Echo Squad had arrived. Vaskari heavy artillery had struck a civilian evacuation convoy at the edge of the city. A horrific miscalculation. Elian's parents, his younger sister, his uncle, they were all inside the third truck. There were no survivors. After they pulled him from the rubble, the old man said, the boy stopped speaking. He stopped crying. He stopped being a child. So why is he saluting the men who killed his family?" Malik demanded, stepping forward into the light. The old man's hands trembled violently, because they salute him first. Silence fell over the cellar. Every afternoon, the old man explained. A Vaskari officer steps out from behind their barricade. He looks at the boy, and he salutes him. Ronan felt the air leave his lungs. "This isn't propaganda," he whispered. "This is a conversation." That afternoon, 15:45 hours, Ronan positioned himself on a third-floor balcony, peering through a spotting scope. He waited. At exactly 1600 hours, a figure emerged from the Vaskari side. An officer, tall, wearing a grey command uniform, a jagged scar cutting across his jawline. He stepped into the open. He looked toward the coalition line, and he saluted. Seconds later, Elian stepped out from a bombed-out storefront. He returned the salute. Then he ran. Not in a panic. He ran exactly 2 blocks east. Then he cut sharply 1 block north and disappeared into an alleyway. Ronan dropped the scope. His mind raced to east, 1 north. He pulled a tactical map from his vest, flattening it against the concrete. Drone up, he barked into his radio. "Get me eyes on coordinate grid 4 Echo right now." The Recon drone slipped silently through the smog. The feed streamed directly to Ronan's tactical tablet, through the thermal camera. Glowing white-hot against the cold ground, the truth revealed itself. A Vaskari heavy mortar team, setting up a firing position in the exact alleyway Elian had vanished into. Elian wasn't honoring the enemy. He was mapping them. The Vaskari officer wasn't his friend. The officer was using the daily ritual to mask his unit's movement signals to his own snipers. The salute was a timing sequence, and Elian had cracked the code. He was using his own body, standing unarmed in a war zone, to broadcast the enemy's firing coordinates to the coalition forces. The direction he ran was the target. He was 12 years old, sending coordinates to avenge the convoy. "Good God," Malik whispered over the comms. "He's handing them to us." That night, acting on Elian's route, Echo Squad called in a precision strike. They obliterated 3 Vaskari mortar nests before they could fire a single shell. Coalition Command was ecstatic. They called it a massive tactical breakthrough. They wanted to formalize it. Keep observing the boy. keep using the intel. Ronan cut the radio off. Using an orphaned child as a forward observer violated every moral code he had left. Halvren had taken a lot from him, but it wasn't going to take his humanity. The next afternoon, at 15:55 hours, Ronan made a decision that could have resulted in his court-martial or his execution. Ronan walked out of the hospital lobby, unarmed. No helmet. He stepped over the rubble and walked directly into the dead center of the street. Across the divide, the Vaskari officer appeared. He stopped cold, seeing an enemy captain standing in the open. A second later, Elian emerged from the shadows. The boy looked at the Vaskari officer. Then he looked at Ronan. He was confused. The ritual was broken. Before the boy could raise his hand, Ronan raised his. He didn't salute. He just held his hand up, palm out. A universal gesture. Stop, I see you. I know what you're doing. But it ends today. The Vaskari officer's eyes narrowed. He realized instantly what was happening. The coalition knew his timing signals. He had been compromised by a child. The officer's jaw tightened. Out of pure spite, he snapped a salute anyway. Elian looked between the two men. The man who'd killed his family, and the man trying to stop him from dying. For a long, terrible moment, the wind simply blew dust between them. Then Elian lowered his hands. He turned his back on the Vaskari officer. He didn't run this time. He just walked slowly toward Ronan's line. The retaliation came at midnight. The Vaskari knew their forward positions were burned. They launched a full-scale assault to wipe Echo Squad off the map. Artillery rained down on the hospital sector, shattering the remaining concrete. The sky turned a violent, bruised orange. Echo Squad fought like animals backed into a corner. Torin laid down suppressing fire from the second floor, while Ronan and Soren held the ground-level breaches in the blinding flash of a thermite grenade. Ronan looked across the street. Standing behind a wrecked tank was the Vaskari officer. For a fraction of a second, they locked eyes through the smoke. There were no salutes, just the cold, brutal understanding of two men trying to kill each other in the dark. You broke my signal. Now I level your building. The siege lasted 6 agonizing hours. When the sun finally bled through the smoke at dawn, the Vaskari had exhausted their munitions and retreated. Sitting on the steps, unharmed, covered in the fresh grey dust of the night's battle, was Elian silent, watching the smoke rise. Coalition. High Command demanded the boy be extracted to a black site for debriefing. They called him an intelligence asset. Ronan stood in front of the transport chopper and refused to let them take him. He's not an asset, Ronan snarled over the deafening roar of the rotors. He's a kid. Let him go to the refugee camps. Command didn't argue for long. There were bigger battles to fight. Elian was evacuated. The ritual ended, and 2 weeks later, plagued by compromised positions and heavy losses, the Vaskari Front withdrew from Halvren City entirely, not because of a massive military push, not because of a general's genius, but because a 12-year-old boy had found a crack in their armor, and he broke it wide open. 5 years later, Halvren was no longer a tomb. Cranes filled the skyline instead of smoke. Ronan Vale, retired, wearing a civilian coat, stood at the edge of a military academy courtyard. He watched a group of cadets line up for a graduation ceremony. Standing at the front of the formation was a young man, 17 years old, taller now, broad-shouldered, but with the same intense, quiet eyes. Elian Varek today. He wasn't saluting the men who destroyed his life. He was saluting a flag that no longer burned. After the ceremony, Ronan approached him. The noise of the crowd faded away. "Why did you do it?" Ronan asked softly, a question he'd carried for 5 years. Elian looked at the older man. For the first time, he spoke. His voice was steady, anchored in something deeper than trauma. "Because they thought I was grieving," Elian said. "They thought I was just a broken kid in the street." He paused, looking back toward the newly paved roads. "But I wasn't grieving. I was remembering." Ronan swallowed hard. Remembering what? Their faces, their numbers, their locations. Elian turned back to Ronan, his eyes locking onto the former captains. War only wins. If the children forget, in every war, history remembers the generals. It builds statues for the heroes. But sometimes, the bravest act of defiance doesn't come from a rifle. It comes from the smallest hand. And sometimes, the enemy's greatest mistake is failing to realize. The child they ignore is the one who will burn their empire to the ground.